So I'm going to do the second part of the video first this time. I ended up getting a new grinder. I'm going to do a full breakdown of the DeWalt grinder behind this one after. But before I disassemble the other grinder and clean it, I'll discuss how I get discounts on pretty much all my tools and most of the supplies I use for construction around the house. Not so much automotive stuff. And this has been a pretty reliable way to get 10% off anything, whether it's on sale already or not. And basically it just involves taking advantage of price beat guarantees offered by Lowe's, Home Depot, and Canadian Tire. You might not have a Canadian Tire if you live in the States, but maybe Menards or something would suffice as a suitable substitute. So basically I just find who's got the cheapest one, and somebody always has one that's slightly cheaper or one that's on sale. And then I go to the most expensive store, and I find it's almost always Lowe's, and then just get them to price match it. So this grinder was, I think, $120, was on sale at Canadian Tire for $120, and then Lowe's price matched and beat them by 10%. So if you're not doing that, I recommend you get into it. Anyway, these two grinders, very similar. It's the exact same grinder. The new one goes at 11,000 RPMs. The old one goes at 10,000 RPMs. Old one was made in 2007, and the new one was made in 2021. So very similar product, almost identical, but about 15 years apart. The one big difference I actually found between the new grinder and the old grinder is the new grinder has a safety button, so it doesn't actually engage unless you push that button. The old one has the same configuration, but that button is actually used to hold the trigger down. So you push the button, it just keeps spinning and spinning until you touch the trigger again, it pops up. So what I'm going to do is take the trigger off of the old one. I'm just going to save that, and I see how I like the new one, because I often do use that automatic hold down button that the trigger has so that you don't have to sit there holding the trigger the entire time that you're doing your grinding. So I'm just going to take it off, see how I like the new one, and I'll just save this little trigger for later. That is not really part of the video though. And the trigger isn't necessarily the problem. What happened was I was using this grinder on my car, and it started going really slow, and then it started smoking a lot, and then it got extremely hot, and then just completely stopped working. So I'll just take off some of the accessory parts before I start breaking it down. And really there's only about 12 screws that hold this whole thing together, so it's actually pretty fast and easy to break down. The first part I'm taking off here is called the spindle assembly, I believe. I'm no expert on grinder part names, so if I get something wrong, you can burn me in the comments or something. So spindle assembly, and that thing actually seems like it's spinning just fine. So basically I'm breaking this down until I find something that doesn't spin very well. So again, there's another 4 bolts that are going to hold in the next part of this, which I believe is the gear case assembly. So it's going to hold a little bit of grease, and once that's out, it comes sort of right out. Now you can sort of spin everything directly, and it's not spinning well. So I am going to pull the armature out of the grinder, but before I do that, I'm going to remove the plastic bits off the handle. The little black screws that are in the middle there, those are actually purely decorative, so you don't have to remove those at all. But once you get the 4 screws off the handle, you just use a flathead screwdriver and sort of pry everything apart. There's just some little rubber clips that are sort of holding everything together there. But once you get it moving, it'll all just sort of peel off. So nothing to it, and then there's just 2 electrical connectors that need to be removed so you can sort of pull everything apart. To remove the armature, you do need to take off the plastic just because you have to manipulate the carbon brushes to get it back in, but for removing, you actually don't have to remove the handle. So I'm going to put a little piece of tape so that I know which electrical connector came off which side. I'm assuming that if you get it backwards that it would still work, but it would probably just spin in reverse. I could be wrong on that though. And then I'm going to just use the flathead, doing a little bit of prying, and then the armature comes out without too much issue. And I am going to clean this up. It kind of looks a little burnt, which is probably not a good sign, but I'll give it a good cleaning. both of the bearings are actually spinning very well. So at the front and rear of this thing, there is a bearing that everything sits on. And a little hard to see in here, but this is probably the biggest problem. There's a bunch of melted plastic stuck on the inside of what I believe is called the field. So the magnetic field. Now there's two screws holding this little piece of plastic on. I don't think that plastic does anything other than sort of keep dust and dirt out of the field. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm using electrical parts cleaner and just a Scotch-Brite. So a little nylon brush, it's not going to damage anything, to clean up the armature. And you get the idea. I'm going to rub that for a while. Now for the field, again, I'm using the electrical parts cleaner or electrical contact cleaner and a wire brush. It does take quite a bit of time because that is baked on plastic in there and it's not looking good. But we'll give it a try. If you pull the brushes back, it'll actually clip into place, so you don't have to hold them the entire time. So pull the brushes back, put that piece of plastic on, reinsert the armature, make sure everything's spinning, and it is spinning better. It's not all gummed up in there with melted plastic or whatever that was. The bearings look good. It doesn't sound like it's really grinding too much like it did before. And then just pull that little spring back and push the brushes back in so they're making contact with the armature. Put the electrical connectors back on, and then it's really just the screws. It's really the reverse of the disassembly. So snap the handle cover back in on one side, snap the other side of the handle cover back in. Reinstall the gear case assembly, and there is grease inside of that gear case assembly, so if yours is all dried out or whatever, keep in mind that mine is definitely greased. And then just take the last 4 screws and reinstall the spindle assembly. And once that's done, it should spin well. But like I said, mine got extremely hot, smelled like burning, and stopped working entirely. So mine is still not working. Normally I just do voiceover, but I'll put a little bit of volume on. You can see a lot of sparks on the inside. And you can see, black smoke billowing out as soon as I touch the button. So that's what it's been doing the whole time. And I'm pretty sure some of the wiring has melted. And that's why there's a bunch of melted plastic stuck on the armature and within the field. So it doesn't come back to life. I'm not going to save it, obviously. I've cut some parts out of it, but 15 years out of a DeWalt grinder for $100 isn't a bad deal, I guess. And on a positive note, it would seem like these DeWalt tools are almost inflation proof because the new one I got was right about the same price as this old one, so right around $100. Not a bad deal for 15 years of use. Anyway, thanks for checking out my video. Don't forget to like and subscribe.